come on in, pull up a chair, and take a load off. Because today I'm going to page through and review the Delta Green Slipcase set, which is from Art Dream Publishing. This includes the Agent's Handbook as well as the Handler's Guide. So, is Art Dream's Delta Green a must-have modern dive into covert operations against the mythos? Or does it flounder in comparison to the original incarnation? Well, you'll find out after this. Howdy, 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 gang. Yes, I'm Jeff McAleer, back once again as your host here at the Gaming Gang channel. So, as I mentioned in the open, I will be reviewing the slipcase set for Delta Green, which essentially means I am going to share and review both the Agent's Handbook and the Handler's Guide. As I mentioned previously, the Delta Green slipcase set is from Art Dream Publishing. It includes both the Agent's Handbook and Handler's Guide. It does carry an MSRP of $99.99. The Agent's Handbook is written by Dennis Detweiler, Christopher Gunning, Shane Ivey, and Greg Stolze, with artwork provided by Dennis Detweiler. If you'd like to acquire the 192-page hardcover book alone, it is available for $39.99, or you can grab the Agent's Handbook in PDF at DriveThruRPG for $19.99. The Handler's Guide is written by Dennis Detweiler, Adam Scott Glancy, Kenneth Haidt, Shane Ivey, and Greg Stolze, with artwork once again provided by Dennis Detweiler. This 368-page tome is available in hardcover for $59.99 or in PDF for $29.99 at DriveThruRPG. So let's swing on over to the other camera and take a look to see what goodness that Art Dream might have in store with Delta Green. Okay, so I've actually got both the Agent's Handbook and the Handler's Guide out here, and we are going to take a look at both of these. Do want to mention that previously I did pretty detailed page throughs for each of these volumes. So that is not something that I will be doing today, but I will page through, share some thoughts about each of these books, and of course, I will wrap up with my final thoughts as well as my review score. So this is the Agent's Handbook, and this is effectively your core rule book. Now, I know there were a few folks out there who thought the Handler's Guide was kind of like the Dungeon Master's Guide, and of course, the Agent's Handbook is sort of the player's handbook. That is not the case. You can run adventures with the Agent's Handbook very easily because all of the crunch is in this book. So that's important to keep in mind because I know some folks thought, well, what is this? Is this like, Dungeons and Dragons, or is this like Pathfinder? I have to have a player's book and a DM's book, and then I've got to have a monster manual. That is not the case here. So if you are familiar at all with Call of Cthulhu or the basic role-playing or RuneQuest, any of the D100 percentile systems, then you will be right at home with Delta Green, because Delta Green actually was originally a supplement. I want to say it was Pagan Publishing put it together. It was a modern supplement for Call of Cthulhu. So it was actually the original Delta Green did not have actual rule mechanics for the entire game in it because it was simply a supplement to Call of Cthulhu. That is not the case here. This is its own game in itself, but very, very reminiscent of the D100 system. So if you're not familiar with the D100, essentially you've got various different skills. We're looking at some of the skills right here. And you're going to roll percentile dice. And as long as you roll your skill or below, then you succeed. If you roll above, well, then you've failed. And of course, the keeper, the game master, They will maybe give you bonuses. They might give you penalties depending on the difficulty of the task. Now, one thing you will not see with these skills in Delta Green is that breakdown that 7th edition Call of Cthulhu does now with the skill where it's like, okay, well, if it's difficult, then it's a half. And if it's extremely difficult, then it's a quarter. And you've got all these numbers all over your character sheet, which I got to be honest, I am not really a huge fan of. I sort of threw that out in my games. Sorry, Chaosium. I still love you guys. And Call of Cthulhu. There was just something that I was like, no, we didn't really need to do that, did we? I could just, subtract 20 or add 15. So also your characters are going to have the core attributes. You got your strength, constitution, dexterity, intelligence, power, as well as charisma. Power, once again, if you're not overly familiar with Call of Cthulhu, or even like RuneQuest, basic role playing, it is, I don't want to say it's necessarily wisdom, but it is sort of how you click within the universe, I guess we'll say. How well you fit in. So, of course, your sanity is derived from your power. So, here we have a section talking about using skills, success, and failure. One of the aspects that I thought is pretty cool about Delta Green is they've kind of lifted an idea from Pelgrane Press and their gumshoe system, specifically Trail of Cthulhu, because I got to be honest, I'm not overly familiar with a lot of the other gumshoe titles. But what you'll do is one of the I guess knocks we'll say about Call of Cthulhu, especially original Call of Cthulhu in its early editions, is that you'll have these skills, and if you fail your skill, then it's kind of like, well, we're kind of done playing tonight, which is always a drag. So you would have library use and spot hidden item, and you'd have listen and things like that. Whereas if you, like I said, if you failed, then you were out of luck, and good luck. The keeper was going to have to sit there and try to figure out some way to kind of like give you that information or give you those clues anyway. Which in reality, why would you have to roll dice in the first place then if that's just going to be the case? Well, in Trail of Cthulhu and in Gumshoe, the player characters get clues. If they have certain skills, they just automatically will get clues, get ideas, things like that. Well, here in Delta Green, if your character has a skill level high enough, and off the top of my head, I want to say it's 40. If it's 40% or higher, then if it's not something that is, time sensitive, right? Oh, got to get this done right now. Then it's an automatic success. And I like that. I think that is very, very cool. All right, so we're just kind of flipping through here. We had some combat rules. Combat's pretty simple. Another aspect of Delta Green is a lethality rating for weapons. So effectively, if you're hit by this, or more likely your player characters are using this weapon and they hit and they roll under the lethality rating, they basically just off whoever they shot. So another aspect of Delta Green is that the great old ones, and like Cthulhu himself, who is really not mentioned in this book. In fact, the mythos really isn't mentioned either. It's just the unnatural. But in the Handler's Guide, they do get down into talking about the old ones. And one thing that always just blew me away and had me laughing, and I thought, wow, this is just the stupidest thing, is how Call of Cthulhu would give Cthulhu like 300 hit points. And it was like, come on, let's get real here. Don't give him hit points, because let's be honest, there's absolutely no way you are going to kill Cthulhu. And maybe if you've got some nukes, but what are you going to do? Roll all those damage dice for a nuke? I don't know. So, as I mentioned, this is a player-facing book, obviously enough. So, there is not a lot of fluff in here. There is not a ton of background about Delta Green or the enemies or challenges that Delta Green faces. I was a little bit surprised by that. Uh, Once again, as I mentioned when I started paging through this, that there is enough info for you to run adventures from this. And I got to be honest, those out there who have been big fans of the original Delta Green, they might have a few quibbles with this. But I have to be honest, I think this is fantastic. I think this is a fantastic set with the two books. And I'll kind of discuss why when I sum everything up. But, there are some things that are kind of cut from this new edition that I'm sure fans of the original Delta Green might be a little upset about. Some of the big bads, some of the really the organizations that Delta Green was up against, and things like that. They're kind of not really discussed in the Handler's Guide. So here's a section. It's a pretty good sized section here, talking about different federal agencies and the kind of characters that you might have that would be members of these federal agencies. I do have to say that Delta Green strikes me as a really good system for someone to run if it was one game master and like one or two players. Probably more so than, say, Call of Cthulhu, simply because Call of Cthulhu, you're looking. I love this picture, by the way. I think this is fantastic. Call of Cthulhu tends to call for more player characters. Not tons. I tend to run my games with about 4. But as I mentioned, I honestly really think that you could just pull this off just one-on-one. There is a little less of a callback in the new addition to shows like X-Files, where the funny thing is, the original Delta Green was kind of under development about the same time that the X-Files show was under development. So they both kind of arrived at the same time. And I know there were people out there who thought, "Oh well, Delta Green's just kind of ripping off. It's riffing on X-Files," and it's sort of like, well, not really, because they were actually kind of came out about the same time. And a lot of people don't realize, or they forget, X-Files was not all that popular when it first began. Its first season, it was not a big hit show. In fact, I got to be honest, I don't think X-Files was ever a huge or ratings darling, I should say, in its original run. It did well for Fox, and it had a rabid fan base, but it was not like The Simpsons. It was not bringing people in like The Simpsons. Right. So once again, this whole section I've been going through here, this is all federal agencies. So I think it's kind of cool. You can play characters who are from the CDC or EPA, and then we get some appendices. Going through some of these here. The rule system itself has got some crunch, not a ton of crunch. If we hold it up to, say, let's say 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, it is crunchier than that, simply because you do have a certain number of skills and so forth. But I would say Pathfinder, it's not as crunchy. And actually, the new edition of Pathfinder, I would say it's kind of equal. Let's say equal in say complication or complexity. So that is the Agent's Handbook. Now we've got the Handler's Guide. I'm going to jump in this. We're going to page through this pretty quick too. The Handler's Guide is, of course, for Game Master's eyes only. If you are a player, you probably do not want to end up looking at this. I get a kick out of this. Chicago News at 9. Culture Watch. Obviously, this is supposed to be from WGN, because WGN is the only Chicago station that has news at 9, and that's their big thing. They always say news at 9. So I thought that was pretty funny right off the bat. It's like, aha. But this is something that Delta Green does, especially here in the Handler's Guide, is that it really does kind of immerse you in the setting. Now, when we were looking at the Agent's Handbook, I was talking about how we're probably going to see some folks who have been playing Delta Green for years and years, and they haven't transitioned over to the new edition, the Arc Dream publishing edition of Delta Green, because that they've probably heard that some of their favorite, big bad organizations and things like that are not in. They're really given short shift, if anything. I mean, some of them just aren't even discussed. So, for people who think that, I do want to point out there is still loads and loads of stuff in here. And one of the aspects of kind of the transition that Delta Green made is that, as opposed to the past, where it was all, as a joke, it's like Spectre, or it gets smart. All these different agencies, and they're all bumping heads against each other, as well as having other foreign agencies and organizations that they're going up against. In the new Delta Green, those really aren't the big challenges. Though that's not what people should be worried about. People, and the focus now is more on like individuals. I don't want to say like the lone nut, but more along the lines of individual cultists and just people who are just disconnected from the real world. So I thought that was very interesting. Now, there is still lots of information about all these various other organizations and enemies and challenges facing Delta Green. One of the cool things I like about this new edition as well, and of course, we get kind of a timeline that's walking us through the history of Delta Green, because Delta Green was formed after the army attack in the story Shadow over Innsmouth. So they attacked the deep. Wasn't it called the Deep Reef? If I remember correctly, and capture some of the deep ones, and that's when they formed Delta Green. Then Delta Green was kind of unplugged in the '70s, which is actually, interestingly enough, kind of the focus of Fall of Delta Green, which is from Pelgrane Press. And we've got a review of that on the Gaming Gang. Sammy did a nice review for us and said it's a fantastic game. Funny enough, I believe both the new edition of Delta Green as well as Fall of Delta Green were both kind of being developed at the same time. So they kind of they're not like completely separate, right? The entities really do complement each other. Although Fall of Delta Green is a completely different system. It is a D6 system. And as I've mentioned a few times already, the Delta Green is from it uses the D100 system. So we've got loads and loads of what people like to refer to as background and fluff. One thing you will not see in the handler's guide here, and might bother some folks, you're not going to see just tons and tons of stat blocks for different baddies. It's just not really the gist of what's going on in the handler's guide here. The handler's guide is basically trying to give you a history where you could effectively create a campaign or create scenarios and adventures throughout any part of this timeline as we get up to the present day. No more secrets. Anyway, I was going to say one of the aspects that I like is that you've got kind of two flavors of Delta Green that are kind of competing with each other. You've got the governmentally approved Delta Green, and then you've got the Outlaws. But the Outlaws are still trying to fight the unnatural as well. So this is where we're going to get into here we go. We're going to talk about the great old ones right here. So we talk about the various different aspects of the challenges facing Delta Green and the world. I should also point out, as far as sanity working in the game, a little bit different. They have, I gotta say, in my opinion, the way the sanity is handled in Delta Green is much more realistic, uh, as opposed to, say, Call of Cthulhu. Because Call of Cthulhu is really just trying to game the sanity, the sorts of struggles with sanity that the player character, I shouldn't say player characters, the protagonists in a Lovecraft story face. Whereas Delta Green is looking at it more from, like, if they were to suffer post traumatic stress disorder, right? That's kind of how sanity is dealt with in this. I thought that is really, really well done. And it is respectfully done, too. Not to say the Chaosium, was disrespectful in their approach to sanity, especially, more recent editions have kind of said, hey, we understand that Lovecraft isn't exactly, a great guy in real life, or was a great guy in real life. And his handling of, people losing their minds is a little triggering for some people. So anyway, moving right along, just kind of going through here, we've got different kinds of spells, incantations. I always think that's pretty cool. So the unnatural is very, very interesting, as far as, because there's a good mix of mythos as well as non-mythos entities. So here we've got like deep ones, greater deep ones. But if you notice, this I think this might be the first stat block we ran across in this book, and we're 193 pages in. So as I mentioned, that is not the main focus of the handler's guide. So if you're someone who's like, oh man, I just gotta get me like hundreds of pages of stat blocks to read, this ain't it. There's plenty in here. Don't get me wrong, but once again, that's not really the focus of this handler's guide. The focus is to give you the background and to give you plenty of fluff and backstory for you to create your own adventures. There are also quite a few adventures that are available right now in both PDF and softcover and hardcover from Arc Dream Publishing. In fact, as I record this, there is going on right now. So, of course, if you see this in a year after I've recorded it, you're going to be out of luck. But for about the next, I want to say 20 days, there are 2 bundles of holding going on where you can score just about everything Delta Green from Arc Dream Publishing for fantastic prices. Just smoking deals. One of the bundles is pretty much the core books. So we're talking about the Agent's Handbook as well as the Handler's Guide. And then some other, adventures, things like that. Some of the older scenarios. And then we also have the newest scenarios as well. So now we get into the schism. And this kind of talks about, so what exactly happened here with the program? So why do we have outlaws and why do we have governmentally approved agents? So talking about all of that in here. I'm not talking about a lot of this stuff because I don't want to spoil stuff, because I know there are people out there who are players and they'll watch these kind of videos. We do actually get some biography information about some of the main movers and shakers in the fictional world of Delta Green as well. Almost wrapping this up here. But all in all, I think this slipcase edition with the 2 hardcover books is excellent. Really, really nicely done. And of course, as I mentioned previously, you can, of course, run adventures from the Agent's Handbook. So you don't have to necessarily purchase both of these books. I would personally recommend it, but you don't have to. Important individuals, the outlaws. So there we go. Moving on through here. You can tell that this book also has, just as so does the Agent's Handbook, this has kind of a really modern look to it. And then we get an opera, which is basically an operation, I guess, in spy terms or espionage terms. A night at the opera is an operation. And that's how we will wrap up the book with some appendices. And here we get some like adventure nuggets tossed in as well. It's not full-fledged adventure. We get a little bit of a bestiary, not much, not a whole lot in here, but these are mainly just, animals. And then some recommended reading or media. And that wraps up. Got an index, some handler sheets that you may want to print out for your adventures to kind of keep track of everything. So that is the Handler's Guide as well as the Agent's Handbook. Now, what do I think of everything as a whole? And what is my review score? So, what do I think of the Delta Green slipcase set from Art Dream Publishing? Well, I have to really look at it as both books together because I'll be very honest, you're not going to want to pick up the Agent's Handbook if you're a game master, right? You're not going to pick up the Agent's Handbook and not get the Handler's Guide, and you're not going to get the Handler's Guide without getting the Agent's Handbook. So let's be very honest here. Even though you could conceivably run Delta Green Adventures with just the Agent's Handbook. In fact, you can pick up the quick starts if you'd like to get a better feel for the system. It's absolutely free. You can get the PDF over at DriveThruRPG, and it is the Need to Know quick start. So first off, let's talk a little bit about the Agent's Handbook. Really like it. It is jam-packed with info. I like the changes that have been made compared to, say, Call of Cthulhu, such as the if your skill level is high enough and if you're not like pressed for time, that you automatically succeed. I also like the lethality factor of weapons as well. And of course, the silliness of Cthulhu having 300 hit points and things like that is long gone. So I like the fact that the rule system is very easy to grasp. If you have run any D100 system, basic role playing, RuneQuest, Call of Cthulhu, you're going to ease right on into this. There's just a few changes from, say, Chaosium's basic role playing that one and done. You just check it out and you're like, oh, okay, makes sense. I like that. I have to also point out that the artwork's very cool in both books. Nothing like super gross out or anything like that, but there are some very macabre images and some creepy things going on. So I dug that as well. So big thumbs up for the Agent's Handbook. As far as the Handler's Guide, I dig it. I think it's very cool. I think there will be some gamers out there who will have some issue. I will mention that in just a moment. But it's jam-packed with plenty of info, maybe not pointed like mechanically towards the game as much as some people would like. There are, of course, stat blocks about the various different creatures and so forth, that characters are going to run across. There is a very small kind of bestiary in back with just, average everyday creatures like bears, say, or alligators, things like that. But as far as the vast majority of the material that's in the Handler's Guide, it is all background. It's the history of Delta Green. It's talking about the schism, which has broken the Delta Green organization into kind of two entities that aren't always working towards the same ends, which I think is very, very cool. And it, of course, talks about some of the some of the challenges and some of the nemesis that a game master can roll out there in front of their player characters. As far as adventure wise, there's a very short scenario that's included in the book. I would have liked to have seen more adventures in the Handler's Guide, but once again, you're getting a lot of info. There will be folks out there who are not going to appreciate the fact that Arc Dream did not carry over a lot of the organizations and villains and things like that from the original edition of Delta Green. But I can see why they made that change, because original Delta Green came out like late 90s, and we were afraid of different things back then, right? We were, afraid of like nuclear war and, going to war with China or Russia or something like that. Okay, we should still probably be worried about those kind of things today, but now people are creeped out more about the outsider, the mysterious loner who could suddenly decide that they're going to gun down people in a location. Those are the things that strike fear in people's hearts nowadays, as opposed to, say, the evil empire of the Soviet Union, or non-existent Soviet Union now. But like I said, there will be people out there who will kind of be bummed that some of their favorite organizations that stand in the way of Delta Green have kind of gone the way of the dodo, or they just really don't get a lot of attention in the Handler's Guide. All in all, I think both books really, really work well. I would be jumping at a chance to maybe run some Delta Green, and that's saying something, because my Cthulhu mythos role-playing has always been Call of Cthulhu. And even with the modern stuff that came out from Chaosium, it just never really clicked with me. I thought the adventures were kind of cool, but not something I would want to run. I liked my 1920s, 1930s CFC. That said, reading through the 2 core books for Delta Green, I'm like, the juices are flowing, yeah, to terrorize my player characters. So a very, very big thumbs up. So if I were to grade this on a scale of 1 to 10, which I tend to do, I would give the Delta Green Slipcase set a very, very solid 9.6 out of 10. Only little knocks that I have. One is the way the information is presented on some of the pages makes it a little difficult to read, as opposed to, the traditional like 2 columns. So I got to ding it a little bit for that. And it's basically just a modern graphic design. Some of it just was a little over the top, in my opinion. But that's it. That is really the only quibble I have with this set. So I do also want to mention that if you are watching this video shortly after I've recorded it, and today is actually October 10th, 2019, there is a bundle of holding going on right now at bundleofholding.com, and you can get pretty much everything for Delta Green from Arc Dream Publishing in PDF for a steal. There are 2 bundles. First bundle is mainly the core books, including the Agent's Handbook, as well as the Handler's Guide, and some of the older scenarios. The second bundle is all of the newer adventures, and Control Group, which is a selection of, I think it's 6 adventures. But you can get both for a song for a really, really good deal. So like I said, that only runs probably until, I want to say it's about October 28th, 2019. So if you catch this video after the fact, maybe go to Drive-Thru RPG if you want to get the PDFs. So there you have it for this time out. Don't forget to catch me live right here on YouTube Mondays through Fridays at 7 p.m. Central with the Daily Dope, as I bring you the latest tabletop gaming news. And of course, when you are not watching videos on the Gaming Gang channel, please visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. Come on, by now you know the drill. Get your geek on over at thegaminggang.com. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and until next time, happy trails. Whoa, hey. I didn't realize that you were still here. Well, if that's the case, then allow me to share the following information with you that I only have 20 seconds to do. So let's all take a deep breath. So, if you would like to subscribe to the Gaming Gang channel, please click right here. If you want to check out the latest episode of the Daily Dope, click right here. And if you'd like to check out a randomly selected standalone video, by all means, click right here. Once again, I'm Jeff McAleer, and thanks for watching.